Hello friends, welcome to the introduction of multimodal urban transportation systems module 2, which is on public transportation, and lecture 1 where we will be introducing public transportation. The concepts that will be covered during this lecture include classification of transportation. We will look at some history of public transportation, describe what do you mean by public transportation, what are its benefits, what is the current state of public transportation in India, and look at the differences or the similarities between public transportation and private vehicle transportation, and then finally look at the challenges of how to improve public transportation in India. So, when we talk about public transportation, we can classify transportation broadly into two areas, broadly two ways. One as urban transportation and one as regional transportation. So, when we talk about urban transportation, we are essentially talking about trips within the city or short trips. So, intracity trips or short trips, whereas when we are talking about regional trips or regional transportation, we mean trips taken on longer rail transportation systems or air transportation systems, which are mostly intercity trips. Furthermore, you can break down transportation into three different categories, which is private transportation, public transportation, and intermediate transportation. So, this module is mostly based on public transportation systems. So, if you look at this chart, this is what we were talking about, urban and regional, and they can be further classified into public, private, and intermediate. And we are looking at public transportation, which are usually bus based and rail based, and when you combine those two, you can say that we are talking mostly about surface public transportation. So, in these lectures, we will be mostly looking at rail based and bus based transportation systems. We are not getting into water based public transportation or air public transportation systems. So, when we look at the history of public transportation, cars came in very late into the transportation system domain. We usually used to walk to different kinds of places. Goods were then transported either by horse driven cars or even through waterways before cars came in. So, there were animal driven carts, there were even electric coaches that were there earlier in public transportation systems, whereas motorized fuel based transportation systems came in much later. So, these are some of the old pictures where you will see the horse driven omnibus, you will see the double decker horse driven omnibus. Then started coming the cable cars in San Francisco, United States, and then slowly the Ford Motor Company started building the cars, what we know as the automobiles of today. That is where Ford started building motorized cars, and now we are already talking about autonomous vehicles. So, we definitely have come a long way, but it is always good to know the history of transportation before you learn about transportation or public transportation. So, how can we describe public transportation? What is a definition for public transportation? So, you always, when we start studying a concept, you have to know how do you describe it. So, when we talk about public transportation, we are talking about common carriers. Those are not owned by any of the passengers that are riding them, and then people pay a fare to get the services of these systems or public transportation systems, and the service operates on a fixed schedule and a fixed route. So, these are some of the characteristics, or this is how you describe public transportation systems, right? And it also includes features like stops. So, there are some certain stops at which you will get these public transportation systems. There is a timetable according to which these systems run. So, you have to pay a fare, you can pay a fare either every day or a monthly pass, and there are different route numbers, etc. So, these are some common characteristics of describing any public transportation system. Now, when we start looking at the benefits of public transportation system, we can broadly say there are benefits under these 5 different domains. There are mobility benefits, there are environmental benefits, there are monetary benefits, social and safety benefits. So, what do we mean by mobility benefits? So, under mobility benefits you would see that if you have an efficient public transportation system or urban public transportation system in your area, it is usually taking up less space. So, as our cities are congested, as we grow, we have lesser and lesser space available. And when we talk about space for public transportation or space for transportation in general, usually this space, when we provide it in a CBD, the price of that area is usually very high. So, if you take it up for public transportation or for transportation, then you are not utilizing or getting maximum benefits, monetary benefits from that space. So, we always want to minimize the space given to public transportation or given to transportation in general. So, you would see that we do not encourage a lot of parking spaces in CBDs. So, parking space is a transportation facility, is a space for a transportation facility. So, when we talk about public transportation systems, you usually need lesser space. Public transportation systems reduce traffic congestion. So, if you move a lot of people in a very little space, the congestion usually reduces and it will generally save time. So, if you are, for example, if you are riding on metro rail, usually people want to ride on metro rail because it provides travel time savings during, especially during peak hours of travel. Then when we look at environmental benefits, public transportation reduces per capita energy consumption. So, how does it do so? Now, you are traveling, all of you are traveling in one bus. So, the energy consumption is much less when compared to if you travel on different, or all of you travel on your different private vehicle. Energy consumption meaning the amount of fuel that you use up to move that vehicle. There is also reduction in per capita emissions. Similarly, if you are all moving in a bus or a metro rail, the emissions are much less as compared to if you move in your private vehicles. And of course, the noise pollution, the fewer vehicles on the road, the noise pollution is much less. Metro rails are taking caution when they build in the city. Noise pollution is a problem when they are elevated metro rail systems, but there are noise dampening measures that are taken in that case as well. Monetary benefits of public transportation are sometimes direct and many times indirect. Direct benefits are especially are in the case of fares that you pay on public transportation systems. So, usually bus transportation systems are much cheaper than rail transportation or metro transportation, but both of them are much cheaper than the prices that you pay for your fuel at the petrol bunk for your private mode of transportation. Secondary benefits of monetary in terms of monetary benefits are that it improves public transportation usually is seen that it improves the productivity of the people. There are many public transportation systems that now have Wi-Fi systems in them that allow you to work while you are commuting. So, it makes people who live far away, while they are commuting to work, they start working on the public transportation systems that helps them improve their productivity. And also it has been seen that the land values around the public transportation system, especially the public transportation stations, the value of those lands are very, very high. The concept is called transit oriented development. So, it helps in increasing the land value of these public transportation system by introducing public transportation systems. When it comes to social benefits, we have seen that public transportation usually encourages social interaction. It inculcates the behavior of sharing. It helps improve the livability of urban areas. So, more and more these the concept of transit oriented development that I was talking about What it says is if you live closer to your public transportation, you would use more non-motorized modes of transport. Hence the air quality would be better, and so you will be living in a more healthy environment, and the livability usually goes up. The other benefit is also that that public transportation helps the aging and the underprivileged population. People who cannot drive or they do not have a driver's license, they can use public transportation to still go to their offices and earn a livelihood. And lastly, they have tremendous safety benefits where there are reduced number of fatalities and injuries when there are people traveling on public transportation modes as compared or as opposed to private automobile modes. When you look at the current scenario of public transportation in India, you would see that our large metropolitan cities do have a high share of public transportation modes, with Kolkata and Mumbai being the highest, but at the same time these percentages are not the desired percentages. If you look at Kolkata, it is about just over 50, and Mumbai and Navi Mumbai put together is just about 40. So whereas what is desired or what is the goal of the government of India is to have 75% of share of public transportation in cities that are over 50 lakhs in population. So although our large metropolitan cities are doing good in public transportation share, but we still have to do a lot to improve their share of public transportation in those cities. And when it comes to tier 2 or tier 3 cities, we really have to do a good job in improving the share of public transportation modes. Coupled with the reducing share of public transportation modes is the fact that there are reduced number of buses. So if there are no buses available, then people would not take the buses. So what this chart shows is that the total number of buses have almost remained constant in the last 20, 30, 40 years. The number of buses are just not increasing, whereas the total number of two-wheelers and the total number of cars are rapidly increasing. So what is happening is the supply or the number of buses on the streets are constant, whereas the two-wheelers and the four-wheelers are increasing. So more and more people are using their private automobiles. Now, when we start looking at the reasons for the declining share of public transportation, we see that several research shows us these as the primary reasons of reducing declining shares. So one is people often complain that they are less comfortable. You do not get a seat. It's overcrowding in the bus or in the metro systems. Sometimes they are less accessible. So maybe the metro station is 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers away from you, and there is just no way to access the metro station, or it is you do not want to go 2 kilometers out of your way to access the metro system. So accessibility is an issue. People complain about less flexibility. So what happens is when you want to travel, there is not a metro system or a bus available. You have to wait 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and usually people who are currently mostly in a hurry or their lives are so busy, you do not want to wait, and hence you don't end up taking any public transportation system. There are also reliability issues due to congestion on the streets. Buses do not run on their scheduled timetables, so you do not reach your destination on time. And also sometimes people feel that there is no privacy on the public transportation systems due to overcrowding or any other such issues. The other issues with or the other problems with public transportation systems that have come out are that crime related problems at the especially at the bus stops, or if the vehicle is crowded in itself during night times, that is a problem. People almost say that public transportation system is not for me when I am a wealthy person or when I am higher income group person, it's not for me. So there's a social status associated with public transportation system that says that it's probably only for the people who cannot afford a private vehicle. The service is, like I said, slower or unreliable, and there is always an issue when you are changing between two public transportation systems. So, for example, if you have to reach your destination and you have to change two buses or change two metros, then people usually tend to not take them and choose for a private mode of travel. So, on the other hand, why have private vehicles increased? So, now in the last two slides we saw that what are the issues with public transportation systems. Now, let us look at why have private vehicles increased. So, one of the foremost reasons for this is the easy availability or the easy availability of these different types of private vehicles. So, you can buy them, there are different types of loan options that are available to you, there are different variants of just one brand of a vehicle. So, if you want it fully automated, if you want a manual, if you want an automatic, if you want, so there are the options to you are many to choose from, and financing is available at low rates of interest, and so it really makes it attractive for you to purchase a vehicle. Again, the flip side, just as public transportation had a negative connotation when it comes to social status, this has a positive connotation and says that if you are going up in your up the ladder in your social status, you have to have a vehicle. So, that is kind of the stigma that is associated with it. And also research has shown that improving the roadway conditions or providing better roads in your cities almost leads to people buying more vehicles or more private vehicles. So, on the one hand, we want to have good roads in our cities, we want to have wider roads in our cities, but on the other hand, if you have wider roads and good facilities, usually what happens is the public transportation does not increase, but the private transportation usually increases. Increased trip distances. So, this is the one that I was talking about. If you have a sprawled city, if your suburban areas are growing horizontally, then your trip distances are increasing. So, your distance between your home and your office increases. As the distance increases, the probability of using public transportation modes decreases, and the the probability of use of private transportation increases. The biggest benefit that people perceive with private transportation is that it provides point to point connectivity. So, whereas to access a public transportation mode, the public transportation mode will not come to your home, whereas your vehicle is at your home. So, you can move from your home to your office, where your office will have a parking right below it. So, it is almost point to point transportation, whereas the public transportation you have to either walk to the bus stop and walk from the bus stop to your office, or take some other mode to access the public transportation, and hence it does not provide point to point accessibility or connectivity. Easy maneuvering in traffic, flexibility of use. So, you would see that these are just contrasting to what are the points that we talked about when it comes to the decline in public transportation modes. So, flexibility. So, you have high flexibility whenever you want to go to any place, you have your private transportation with you in your home. So, you can move. Free parking is a big bonus when it comes to the use of private transportation modes. In our Indian cities, parking is very rarely priced. Even if it is priced, the price is very low, and hence that attracts a lot of people to use vehicle transportation. The last point is where which is slowly coming into effect in some of the Indian cities. It's broadly called congestion pricing. There are no measures to regulate the amount of vehicles that either is purchased or regulate the amount of vehicles that is on the roads. So, some of the measures of doing this is to toll the entry of vehicles into a CBD, so that there are a fewer number of vehicles entering into the CBD. So, these are all regulation related points which have to be enforced so as to reduce the number of private vehicles, but that are not there in many of our Indian cities, and hence the private vehicle use is still very high. Now, what are some of the challenges in improving public transportation? Financial viability is one of the biggest challenge in implementing public transportation systems. Almost all of the public transportation modes are subsidized by the government agencies of their state or country. So, most of these modes are not sustainable in itself. The fares have to be kept very low, so that everybody could use it, and as a result the operating and the maintenance costs are very high, and this makes it almost financially not viable. So, when we start to think about implementing metros in some of the cities, some of the tier 2, tier 3 cities, they are not financially viable because they just do not have enough demand. Demand meaning there are not enough people who would ride it, which would account for the cost of construction and operations and maintenance. Often political will is also lacking. So, when we talk about innovative public transportation systems or bringing back some of the old public transportation systems such as trams on the roads, you often will see that the government will not be in favor of it. They would rather be in favor of some newer technologies like autonomous vehicles coming into the picture. So, public transportation also needs a champion, like we said earlier. It needs somebody who will take it forward and implement it and finance it for the city. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to implement. The other issue is multi-institutional. So, what happens especially in the case of large metropolitan areas, a single public transportation system may be plying between different municipalities or different municipal corporations, and then how do you manage the operations between these different organizations becomes an issue. How are the revenues collected, how are they distributed? That becomes a challenge as well. Staff recruitment and management is always a challenge. Public transportation systems are expected to be open late in the night as well. So, recruiting staff for late night shifts always becomes an issue, and paying them a healthy salary is sometimes a challenge as well. We also see that there are human resources problems in operating and managing large public transportation systems. Usually people are not very well versed with how to manage and operate these systems, just because there are not enough institutions that teach them about how to manage public transportation systems. Now a lot of intelligent transportation is being incorporated into the public transportation arena as well, such as locating where your next bus is, what is the delay on the route. So, to understand all the complexities of each of these public transportation systems, good human resources are required. Qualified technical people are required to run these systems, which are often not the case, not found in very many cities in India. Governance, like I said, different boundaries, different municipal boundaries, different municipal corporation boundaries is an issue. And finally, operators and contractors not talking to each other, not complying with standards is always a problem. There are a lot of public transportation systems that are run by private operators and contractors, and to make them comply to, for example, emission standards becomes very difficult when they say that they are running on tight budgets and their revenues are not that high. So, but this is one of the very essential systems of running a good public transportation system is to adhere to environmental regulations, adhere to emission regulations, and this is sometimes found to be challenging. So, in conclusion, what we have read today in today's lecture is that we have looked at different types of transportation systems. We have looked at different types of public transportation systems where we are mostly focusing on buses and rail based systems in this course. So, they combine together, they are surface public transportation systems. Then we have looked at what are the different benefits from public transportation systems, different environmental, monetary, safety benefits, and then we have looked at how public transportation systems compares against private transportation systems. So, what are the pros and cons of public transportation systems versus private transportation systems, and finally, what are some of the issues that have to be overcome so that the public transportation systems become successful in your city. So, these are the topics that were covered today. The references mostly were taken from these three sources, and we got some of the images from the given sources as well. So, please go ahead and look at these, study these three references to know more about what has been taught, and I look forward to meeting you in the next lecture. Thank you.